Kasi, ayan. Good afternoon once again. So for this afternoon, we will talk about chapter 2 of Zoology book written by Miller and Harley. Okay. So last time we talked about the introduction of the zoology subject. Now, who can give us a little review of what we talked about? Okay. So what is zoology? What is the technical term for the one who studies zoology? Yun. Those are some basic questions that we have answered earlier. Okay, you can just type in there in the in-call messages. Okay. So while others are typing, this chapter is about cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems of animals. So again, what is zoology? I think you already know, since some of you have already taken their first laboratory session yesterday. May I call CJ? Would you like to give us a little background of what we did yesterday or last week? If CJ is not yet ready, may I call Ojel?
Hello po, ma'am. Am
Hi,
I
Ojel.
audible?
Yes.
Um, Zoology po is the study of animals po. Last week po we discussed about it po, and the and also po most all zoologists po are the one that is specialized po in zoology, and they study the particular functional structure or ecological aspects po of one or more animal groups po. And regarding po of what we did yesterday po, we we study po the function of the microscope po and use some specimens po that is in a slide po, right ma'am, that we ano po ma'am, we tried to find po. Yeah, that's all po.
Thank you, Ojel. Ayun, daming na nabanggit ni Ojel. Okay? Talagang na-summarize yung ating mga pinagdaanan na sa buhay for the past week. Okay, so thank you. The other half will experience the laboratory or microscopy session also tomorrow. I'm excited and I hope you will also see other things and experience using the microscope, especially the expensive ones that we have shown or lent to your classmates yesterday. 'Di ba? Mayroon tayong binocular at monocular doon. Those are different from the typical compound microscopes that I have used before. Yan. Siguro meron pa nung basic talagang microscope doon sa Phelan building. I can borrow one so I can show you how it's being used before. Ano po? Yan. Effective naman yon, kaso mas maganda na talaga yung electronic. Ano? Okay, thank you, Ojel. Si CJ, andyan na ba? Baka gusto niya rin mag-share ng hindi pa nababanggit ng iba. You can also raise your hand for others na andito. Andito si Althea. Yan, napakaaga ni Althea kahapon. Si Charlotte, Christine, John, si CJ ito, Fatima May, Francine. Yan, nagme-mention ako ng mga present, Isabel, Janella, Gia, Johan, Georgia K, Joshua, Juan Marco, si JM, Jubilin, Juliana, Crystal May, Mark Dominic, Maria Angela, Maria Aura, Maria Lourdes, si Mika, ay nakita ko Mika yung My Day mo, pinusuan ko, nakita mo ba? Mika, Oh, ang ganda nung
Yes po, ma'am.
Oo. So, kung ano din, I'm so proud of you din. From Goa pa si Mika, nagbiyahe din siya. Micaela Joy, Neil Tristan, Nikki, Noeline, Norhan, Princess, Rhoda May, Riz White, Rizme Ann, Rochin, Cherry, Athena, Sophia Isabel, Thea Marie, Syra, and Yesha. Paano po to basahin? Kier? I forgot again, I'm sorry. Yesha Queer or Choir?
Here po.
Kier. Kier, okay. Kier. Wala kang kahit siguro niyan sa NBI kasi napaka-unique niya. For us here in the Philippines, it's unique. Okay, for me, it's unique talaga. Okay, so let's go to cells. There is a basic definition of cells. Ayan, baka naaalala nyo pa or nabasa nyo na. What is a cell in terms of biology or in life sciences? Yan. Okay, baka may makapag-search dyan. Ito ba yung cell sa cellphone or cellular phone? Ito ba yung cell sa mga kulungan? Kasi cell, ano? Or, ano ba? Nag-pause ako bigla kasi yung anak ko, kumuha ng candy. Yan ang sagot niya sa tanong kong cell. Cell is the fundamental unit of life. Correct. Basic of life. Basic unit. Ayan, kulang lang siguro ng unit kay Syra. Yeah, it's a unit of life. Parang sa mathematics, meron tayong unit of measurement, di ba? O paano natin ma-measure naman yung life? It's through a cell, di ba? Yan yung pinaka basic. The most basic description of life is defined by a cell in which it has life, and life is defined ayun, yung life dito sa sa bahay namin, yung mga dogs, o 'di ba, zoology talaga. Ayan. Nasaan na nga ako? Yan, yung cells, meron siyang mga um, tawag doon, characteristics. Yan, characteristics na nagde-define ng life. Some that I can mention are it can reproduce on its own through cell division. Yan, mag-cell divide siya para dumami siya. It can also move. Ano po, as compared to plant, ang animal cell nakakagalaw on its own, 'di ba? Pwedeng may cilia or flagella and other organs for it to move or locomotion. For one characteristic is locomotion. Ano pa ba? It can respire or breathe in what we call respiration. It can metabolize or break down or synthesize its own food or energy. Yun ang mga basic characteristics ng cells. Ngayon, tingnan natin kung paano siya i-define ng material na ito. What are cells? The simpler prokaryotic cells lack nuclei and other membrane-bound organelles. Ito, may differentiation tayo. Kasi yung prokaryotic cell class, ito yung sa bacteria. Ano po? Pag eukaryotic naman, ito nasa ikalawang bullet, eukaryotic cells are larger and have many membrane-bound organelles. Saan papasok dito ang cells ng animals and humans? Prokaryotic or eukaryotic? Sige nga, try. Okay, Princess raised her hand. What's your answer? Princess?
Eukaryotic cells po, ma'am.
Correct. Siguro yung iba may background na, no? Nawala ulit si Princess. Or yung mahina ang connection. Yun, nawala din ako bigla. Plus, inayos ko yung aking connection. Nagbawas ako ng gadget na makakahinder sa aking connection. Ano? Intermittent ba ang aking connection? Hindi naman. Hindi naman gaano. Mainit lang. Mag-open ako ng fan, ha? Okay. Going back to the prokaryotic cells, there are two domains for these eukaryotic cells, the archaea and eubacteria. This is the recent now. Dati, dalawa lang yung domain eukarya, tapos domain eukaryotes, tapos domain prokaryotes. Yan. So, sa prokaryotes, meron na siyang two domains, divided na sa archaea at saka eubacteria. Para mas matandaan nyo, si archaea, medyo mga old bacterial cells. Si eubacteria, meron siya yung mga modern bacteria na meron na ang humans ngayon. Pero yung Archaebacteria, pwede rin siyang nag-e-exist na siya noon hanggang ngayon. At merong isa class na matatagpuan sa ating gut. Maybe later I can talk about it. Pero yun, pwede nyong maalala na may Archaebacteria din pala na nasa loob ng katawan ng tao, sa gut natin. They also live in extreme conditions. Too cold, too hot. Yon, mga Archaebacteria sila. Pag eubacteria, yung may mga gram-positive, gram-negative, ang iba nagkukos din ng mga diseases sa humans and animals. Of course, there are good bacteria, yung mga okay sa ating system, like lactobacillus, yung staph or staphylococcus, streptococcus, na normally meron tayo niyan sa ating katawan. Pag na-infect yan or may nakain silang madumi from our body, pwedeng mag-cause ng sa mukha, sa mga pimples, ganon, and other diseases pa. So, correct, we have eukaryotic cells as human beings, and our other friends, the animals, also have eukaryotic cells, in which sa kada isang cell, merong membrane-bound organelles. Ano po? May tanong ba tungkol dito sa main categories ng cells? Yan. Kung wala, continue na tayo dito, ha? Sinong pwedeng magbasa nitong slide na to? Yung hindi ko pa masyadong naririnig sa class. Ayan, sabi niya na. Pwede yung mga kahapon tuloy. Si Althea, please read this slide.
Yan pong dalawang bullet po, ma'am.
Yes po.
Okay po. In the hierarchy of biological organization, the cell is the fundamental unit of life. Therefore, everything an animal does is ultimately happening at the cellular level.
Thank you. So that word is hierarchy. Ayan, dadagdag natin sa inyong vocabulary words. Pag sinabi nating hierarchy, merong pasunod-sunod. Ano, may nasa taas, may nasa baba, or may level of organization. Okay, that is hierarchy. So yung cell, yung pinaka-basic as mentioned earlier. Sa ibang study class, nagsisimula sa atom. Kaso yung atom is not a living organism, or as 'di ba ang atom is the um, basic unit of matter. Ano, sa matter siya. Okay, when we talk about chemistry, si matter ang ay putol-putol si teacher. Ako ba ang putol-putol? Okay, sorry ha. Ayun. So, sa iba, atom. Pero sa atin, since we're talking about life, cell ang pinaka-basic natin. Therefore, everything an animal does is ultimately happening at the cellular level. Okay? Like yung sinabi ko, respiration, locomotion, production of ATP or energy, etc. Okay? Ito na yung hierarchy in a multicellular animal. We have atoms, simple molecules, macromolecules, membranes, organelles. O itong organelles, non-living pa siya class. Pero actually, there is an evolutionary account na may organelles na nag-i-exist on its own. Okay? Like the chloroplast and the mitochondrion. Okay? I-emphasize ko dito ha, yung mitochondrion, kung naaalala nyo yan, powerhouse of the cell, mitochondrion and chloroplast are said to have an evolutionary account to exist account that they existed alone or can or have existed on their own. Ayan. Yan yung iba, ano ko na, in my own words. But when you research about it, meron pa yung isang theory. May isa pa yung theory na si mitochondrion tsaka chloroplast, nag-exist sila ng solitary, tapos in-engulf sila ng larger cell. In-engulf sila ng larger living organism, tapos naging parte na sila ng organism na yon. Halimbawa, yung plant cell, dati wala pa siyang chloroplast. Nung nag-engulf siya ng chloroplast, nakakapag-produce na siya ng food niya, which is, diba, C6H12O6 or the simple sugar or carbohydrate. So, dati hindi pa talaga siya plant. Ang sabi ng theory, parang bacteria pa lang yon. Bacteria pa lang. Tulad din sa humans, nung wala pa ang humans, meron ding isang cell na nag-engulf ng mitochondrion. So, yung mitochondrion na yon, it can produce ATP or energy. Pero unlike sa plant, hindi siya makapag-produce ng own food niya. Hanggang sa nag-evolve sila hanggang iba-ibang mga species ang lumabas dito sa Earth. May connection din dyan ang environmental factors and also yung atmospheric pressure and condition, kaya nag-exist yung iba ng mga organisms. Okay? Kaya hindi natin masasabi na evolution is not correct. Hindi rin natin masasabi na ang creationism is wrong about God. We don't know yung lifespan or time frame ni God. Sabi nga sa Bible, kung nagbabasa kayo, yung 1,000 days daw, parang isang araw lang kay God. Or baka iba din ang ibang scale din yan. 'Di ba? Parang sa atin sa science, 1 meter is equivalent to ilang micrometers. So, mga ganon, 1 million micrometers. Yan. Isang material ko yan class sa laboratory, kung naaalala niyo yung about sa micrometers or microns. Yan yung ginagamit nating pang-measure sa microscope at pag tumitingin tayo ng mga cells. Okay, so next is tissues, or cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and then the animal or the organism. What are cells again? There are 2 basic types of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. All eukaryotes have 3 basic parts: plasma membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus. Comparison of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Ito, ibibigay ko na lang siya as an asynchronous task. Meron akong simulation for this. Hindi naman siya graded, pero magandang ma-experience nyo yung simulation na yon. Kasi comparison ng plant and animal cells. So, until there muna yung pagkaka-describe ko sa prokaryotic tsaka eukaryotic cells. Ang pinaka-basic lang naman class pag prokaryotic, mga bacteria. Pag eukaryotic, ando na yung 5 kingdoms. Yun na yung pinapakita ko sa microscope pag naglalaboratory kayo. Yung 5 kingdoms na yon. Sa totoo lang, meron pala kahapong representative ng Kingdom Monera. Ayun, hindi nyo pa ma-identify siguro or ng iba, pero yun yung i-discuss natin next week. Pag isahang klase na lang kayo. Ayan, sana okay sa inyo na kayong lahat 42 ay ma-meet ko next week sa lab face-to-face. Ayan, sana mag-agree din yung department chair since alert level 1 pa ang Ateneo. Tuwang-tuwa si Roshin. Okay ka lang ba dyan, Roshin? Ano yan? Nag-uusap-usap ba kayo sa GC? Sali niyo naman ako. Okay. Okay, let's move on ha. Grabe, nakaka-7 pa lang tayo. Eto, sabi ko sa inyo na yan ha. Kayo nang bahala niyan. May simulation ako niyan. Hindi ako masyadong stricto dyan sa parts na yan. What are most cells small? Why are most cells small? Bakit small sila? Imagine nyo kung ang lalaki nila, no? Di mga higante tayo, ang daling sagutin. The cell is small because the ratio of the volume of the cell's nucleus to the volume of its cytoplasm must not be so small that the nucleus cannot control the cytoplasm. So sa maliit talaga siya magsisimula para mas makontrol nung nucleus yung activities sa cytoplasm. Okay lang yan na maliit si cell. Kasi after its hierarchy of being a cell, magtutulong-tulungan sila ng ibang cells to become a specialized group of cells. That is what we call tissue. Sa biological systems, ang tissue, yan yung defined by specialized group of cells. Specialized group of cells. Ayan. Narinig nyo na ba yan? Sa high school, narinig na ninyo yan eh. So parang nagre-review at ini-intensify ko lang din yan. The relationships between surface area and volume, ay hindi na ako magpapamat. At least alam nyo to. As the radius of a sphere increases, its volume increases more rapidly than its surface area. So surface area over volume, figure 2.3. If the cell volume becomes too large, adequate exchange of nutrients and waste cannot occur across the plasma membrane. So this is a representation of that area and volume. Yung ina-explain sa atin. Next, yung cell membranes. Ano naman yung cell membranes? composed mainly of phospholipids and proteins, allow certain material to move across them. This quality is called selective permeability. The fluid mosaic model, ito sa ano ko na to dinidiscuss class sa physiology. Ayan, kung ako maging teacher niyo ulit or iba, yung fluid mosaic model or the ability of the cell membrane to accept or reject materials going in and going out of the cell is described in that subject, physiology. Is based on knowledge of the plasma membrane. I will also give you a link to summarize what I am discussing right now via YouTube video. Cell membranes, ito marami siyang purpose, mga function niya. Regulate movement of material, separate the inside of the cell from the outside. Ang animal cells and plant cells, fungi, bacteria, ano pa ba? And then, yung isa, protista, lahat po yan may cell membrane. May nagkakaiba-iba lang. For example, yung sa plant, meron pa silang cell wall. Additional protection ng plant. And to allow it to stand, maging sturdy siya. No? Bakit? Kasi yung plant, hindi siya locomotive tulad ng animals and other organisms. No? Ang protist nakakagalaw. Kahapon nakakita kayo ng protist, yung mga naglab. Alin yung protist doon? Sige nga, kung naaalala, alin yung protist doon? It starts with letter P. Protist, tas letter P din siya. Dinescribe ko siya. Yes! Okay, ayusin lang natin yung spelling. Okay, correct. Paramecium yan. Tama yung spelling ni Ujel. Tama rin naman yung kay Princess na sagot. Minsan sa spelling, nagkakaiba-iba tayo. Alam nyo ba, class, pag nasa ibang bansa kayo, minsan hindi na hindi na masyadong stricto sa spelling. Basta nagkakaintindihan kayo. Pero pag tayo, more formal English, ayan, i-check nyo yung spelling. Correct. So, that is the paramecium. That is a protist. It can also move. Ang plant, hindi. Sturdy siya. May rigid cell wall. Ito yung drawing or itsura ng cell membrane. Okay, tingnan nyo may mga embedded dyan na proteins like globular protein, may cholesterol molecules. Ang cholesterol, siya, isang uri ng non-polar. Pag sinabing non-polar, ang na-attract niya din ay non-polar. Pag polar, tulad ng water, polar din ang na-attract niya. May relationship yan sa kung ano yung papasok at lalabas sa cell. Ayan, may phospholipid head, may tapos yung tail. Nasaan yung tail? Phospholipid tail. Parang ito may mali dito. Kasi ito, okay. Ito siya, itong black. Nakikita nyo ba yung pointer ko? Ay, itong blue, water-loving. Itong yellow, water-fearing. So ito tatandaan nyo din siya sa cell membrane. Sa cell membrane, meron siyang phospholipid bilayer. Phospholipid bilayer. Tapos yung labas, yung outer, water-loving. Tapos yung inner, water-fearing. Hydrophobic. Tapos, ayan, mamaya, ma-encounter natin. Okay, so movement across membrane. Some molecules use their own energy to move from an area of higher to an area of lower concentration. Examples include simple diffusion, Example niyan, pag nag-spray ka ng cologne, 'di ba, nag-i-spread yung mga molecules niya. Simple diffusion. Facilitated diffusion, halimbawa, nag-spray ka ng cologne, tapos pinaypay mo pa yung air or yung air dun sa cologne mo, di mas mabilis siyang nakapunta dun sasabihin natin sa classmate mo, mas naamoy niya. Kasi finacilitate mo ng pagpaypay mo dun sa air. Osmosis and filtration. Osmosis, yung movement or diffusion ng water. Filtration, nafi-filter or may absorption ng molecules. Okay, for example, ito, A, B, C, D. Ano to? Ayun, tingnan niyo siya, oh. Ito yung A, sunod naging B, C, D. Yung molecules ng, I'm not sure kung solid siya, it might be a solid thing. Tapos nag-disperse yung kanyang molecules hanggang sa nag-spread out na until letter D. Okay. Bakit ko to pinapakita, class? Ito yung action na nangyayari sa cell membrane. Bakit? Kasi it's very important that the cell membrane controls what comes in and comes out of the cell. Okay? Mamaya niyan, laso na pala yun sa cell, di ba? Di mamatay ang cell. Okay? Baka mamaya sa accept niya din, mag-burst na siya. It's too much na for it. So, may abnormal na nangyayari sa cell. Okay? There's a possibility din na yung nucleus hindi yun ma-control or identify. Okay. May abnormality. Movement across cell membranes, the diffusion of water across a selectively permeable membrane from an area of higher water concentration to an area of lower concentration is osmosis. Osmosis is just a special type of this diffusion, not a different method. Ito, tingnan nyo to, oh. Outside the cell, tapos papasok siya into the cytoplasm. Ito naman, figure 2, higher concentration to lower concentration. So, punta siya doon. Okay? Kapag may involved na embedded protein, facilitated siya. Okay? And carrier transport proteins. Ayan. Selective permeable membrane, water yung color blue, sugar molecule yung white. Okay. So, kung mapapansin nyo, osmosis dito, kung mas marami yung sugar, yung tubig pupunta din doon. Ayun. Pupunta yung tubig doon sa portion na mas maraming sugar. Okay? Effect of salt concentration on red blood cell volumes. Ito yung sinasabing abnormality. Ipalaki ko lang, ha. Ayan. So, ang normal cells, isotonic solution. Anong klaseng cell itong nakikita nyo? Actually, meron na siyang title, red blood cell. Si red blood cell, dapat isotonic ang solution na. Kapag hypertonic na, bas yung ibang molecules sa loob ng cell niya. Walang nucleus to si red blood cell, ha. Para siyang disc shape. Tapos, meron siyang yung hemoglobin or yung something na nag-a-attract ng oxygen. Yan yung pinaka-purpose ni red blood cell. Kung hindi siya normal, lumalabas yung mga nasa loob niya, magiging siyang shriveled cells. At kung masyado namang maraming nasa loob niya, it will swell and eventually burst. So, yan yung abnormality. concentration sa loob at labas ng cell. Dapat maganda kasi there might be a time sa laboratory nyo na maggagamit tayo ng dye. Yung dye, it's a coloring agent that the cell membrane will attract. Yan, kakapit yung kulay doon sa cell membrane. Para pag tiningnan nyo sa microscope, parang may outline yung cells. Mas maganda siyang i-visualize. Yon. Hindi tulad nung kahapon, 'di ba, meron tayong isang animal cell na nahirapan tayong hanapin. Kung naaalala niyo 'yon, it was natin masyadong ma-identify kasi wala namang dye na ginamit doon sa prepared slide na 'yon. Blood pressure, ito, ano tong example na to? Filtration naman daw ito, filtration. So, no need to discuss so much about it. At least may alam kayo about the exchange of molecules inside and outside the cells. Okay? Ano pa bang mas importante dyan? Mahaba yung discussion actually sa cell membrane, pero na lang kung ipapapanood sa inyo dyan para mas maintindihan. Si endocytosis, important din ito. Related ito, class, doon sa sinasabi kong engulfing. Parang may kinakain siyang material or molecule or something. Tapos, magiging part na siya noong nag-endocytosis sa kanya or parang nag-engulf sa kanya. Tulad nito, extracellular fluid, tapos may materials outside. Ito si cytoplasm. Invagination, kaya din siyang gawin daw ni cell membrane. Formation of pouch, ayan na. Tapos formation of vesicle. So, pang-transport din siya. Exocytosis, reverse ni endocytosis. Ginagamit din especially pag nagta-transport na ng mga synthesized proteins. Ano po? Yan, may mga certain signal via our DNA. Cytoplasm, again, para mas maintindihan si cytoplasm, yan yung gel-like structure kung saan andun yung mga organelles. Yan. So, papapanood ako sa inyo para hindi naman always yung voice ko ang magagamit ko when explaining. So, multimedia tayo, then we can use other forms. Ano po? To describe better about these organelles in a more dynamic way. So, nag-stop tayo sa 25, 26. Yan. So, yan, i-cover ito ng video na ipapalabas ko. Ngayon na, tapos pakatapos nun, sayonara na muna tayo. Ayan. Okay, ito si mitochondrion to. Malapit na. Halos natapos natin to. If mapanood niyo na yung video. Okay, just wait lang po. So, may tanong ba or may nadagdag na information sa inyong arsenal for this afternoon? Sige, baka pwede kayo mag-type in dyan as a form of participation din, lalo na sa hindi pa natawag. Kung ano yung nadagdag sa akalaman nyo ngayon. Ito, papanoorin natin to. Tapos itong isa, ayun, meron tinype si Sofia. Yung unang link, yung papalabas ko ngayon, tapos yung ikalawang link, simulation, na pwede nyong i-practice anytime. Cell is the fundamental unit of life. I learned a lot of knowledge today, specifically about how cell works. Oo, napaka-basic ng cell na kapag may problema tayo, probably may isang cell dyan na nagkahawa-hawaan sila. Parang doon sa cancer cells. Ang cancer cells kasi class, meron tayo niyan lahat. They are probably just, hindi pa sila na-activate or minsan nasa B9 stage sila. Pag B9, may possibility na maging malignant. Parang tumor. Nagko-coagulate yung cells na affected, na irregular na ang functioning, na kapag lumala, may mga stages na, di ba? Stage 1, cancer, stage 2, stage katawan natin. I think yung pinakamahal ay sa bone, pag bone cancer. Kaya, napaka-important of our health. Maganda yung lifestyle natin. Iwasan magpuyat. Siguro, at least minsan nakapagpuyat lang kapag very needed talagang mag-submit sa mga deadlines or mga exams na may mga review ka talaga. Pero ugaliin na kompleto ang tulog at maayos ang pagkain. Sabi din ni Chloe, I learned about mitochondrion and chloroplast theory. Oo, may specific term doon, yung endocytosis theory, like that. Di ba may na-mention doon endocytosis? Ay, oo, ngayon mo lang narinig. Meron siya actually talagang mahabang research about that. Cell in our life, sabi ni Janella. Si Cristel naman, cell membrane separate cells from one another. Ayan, babasahin ko yan habang nag-open tayo ng YouTube video. Si Reese Dwight naman, the structural hierarchy po, ma'am, I learned some new information. Oo, lalo na yung non-living tsaka living components. Yan. The nucleus is the control center of the cell. Yes. Minsan, nakakalimutan yung inilan. Okay. A tab. Share a tab. Tapos mag-mute din ako mamaya. Wait, may ads pa kasi ata ito. Wala na. Dire-diretso na siya. Okay. Wait lang. Nakikita na po yung biology intro to cell structure. Quick review. Pag natapos to, na tayo. Free na kayo. Okay na?
Basic review
Let's
of
watch
the cell
this.
and the things inside of the cell, like the organelles, the tiny organs of the cell. So first we have the nucleus, which is right there. And the nucleus is basically the command and control center. Cell what to do, how to grow, what proteins to make, what lipids to produce. You have long strands of DNA known as chromatin. And the DNA is basically the instruction manual or the blueprint of the cell. It stores the genetic information of the cell. And so within the DNA, you have the instructions on how to make the proteins, how to make the individual organelles of the cell, and what they need to do. Now, inside of the nucleus, we have this ball right here, and that is the nucleolus. Now, the nucleolus, it creates ribosomal RNA to make ribosomes. And ribosomes, you can see these little spheres floated in the cytosol, and the ribosomes, they make proteins. Now, the ribosomes consist of ribosomal RNA and proteins, but they manufacture proteins. Now, the way the nucleus makes proteins is that it sends mRNA or messenger RNA, which carries the instructions to the ribosome to make the specific type of protein that's needed for the cell. Now, the nucleus is surrounded by a membrane known as the nuclear envelope. And on this membrane, you'll find these holes on it, which are go into and out of the cell. So the messenger RNA comes out of the nucleus through the nuclear pores. Now, let's talk about the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. There are two types. The first one is the rough ER, which is all of this in that region, and the second is the smooth ER, which is right here. Now, what do you notice about these two? What is the difference between them? The rough ER contains ribosomes. The smooth ER does not contain any ribosomes. So the rough ER, it assists in adduction of proteins. Because the smooth ER doesn't have ribosomes, it does not make any proteins. However, it does produces lipids, cholesterol, and hormones. It also assists in detoxification, which means it breaks down toxins. And the way it does so is by making these molecules more water soluble so that it can be easily removed from the body or excreted through the urine. Now let's go back to the rough ER. So once the rough ER, by means of the ribosomes, once they make the proteins are enclosed in a vesicle, and those vesicles get transported to the Golgi body, which is right there. Now, the Golgi body, it receives the vesicles, and it modifies the proteins that are in the vesicles. And the way it does so is by adding lipids and carbs to the proteins, and it can also fold the protein. It can give it the proper shape because the function of a protein is dependent on its shape. So once it modifies and processes the proteins, it exports the proteins out of the cell. So here is a visual illustration of what happens to a protein in a cell. Now granted, my drawing is not the best. It is an educational video and not an artist or a how to draw video. And so the protein, it begins at the rough ER because that's where the ribosomes are. And remember, ribosomes, their job is to make proteins. So the protein, it leaves by means of a transport inside of this vesicle, and it goes to the Golgi body for processing and modification. So looking at the protein now, you can see that it has a different shape. At the same time, you could see different colors added to it. So this represents the lipids and the carbs added to the protein. So once the protein has been tagged with those extra molecules, it gets exported out of the cell. So it travels to the cell membrane where the function that it needs to do. Now the transport vesicle that becomes part of the cell membrane, causing the membrane to expand, or basically causing the cell to grow. Now let's talk about some other organelles that you need to know. The next one is the mitochondria. Now the mitochondria has its own separate DNA. It's different from the DNA of the cell. And its job is to perform cellular respiration. In that process, it takes the energy stored in fats and carbohydrates and converts it to a molecule known as ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Next up, we have the lysosome. Now the lysosome, which is here, its purpose is to break down food. It contains digestive enzymes, and in white blood cells, it can also destroy pathogens. When a white blood cell engulfs a pathogen in a process known as phagocytosis, the lysosomes in those white blood cells, it can break down those pathogens or disease-causing agents into smaller stuff that can be used or recycled by the cell. Next up, we have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is basically the jelly-like fluid that is in the cell. So all of the organelles, they're dissolved in the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm contains solutes like salts, electrolytes, and other stuff like carbohydrates, lipids, and free-floating ribosomes and things like that.
First, we have grammarly. The free
About the cytoskeleton. The function of the cytoskeleton is to maintain the shape of the cell. At the same time, it provides structural support. Now, the cytoskeleton consists of a network of 3 fibers. The first of which is the microtubules. The second is the microfilaments, and the third one, the intermediate filaments. Now, how can we identify them in the cell? The microtubules is the largest of the 3 fibers. Microfilaments. Now, this picture really doesn't show it but just know that the intermediate filaments, they're in between, and they provide mechanical support to the cell. Now, the microtubules, they're made up of a protein called tubulin, and the microfilaments of a protein called actin. The microtubules, their purpose is to provide structural support and transportation services to the cell. So vesicles, they can move from one part of the cell to another part by means of the microtubules. The microfilaments, they're involved in elongation and contraction, so they assist the cell to move. Next up, we have the centrioles. And here it is in the diagram. The centrioles are active during cell division. And what it does is during cell division, it pulls apart the chromosome, the cell to be split into two. The chromosomes are basically a condensed version of chromatin, formed during cell division. Now, here are some other terms that you need to be familiar with: cilia and flagella. These also play a role in the movement of a cell. Now, cilia consist of tiny, short, hair-like structures, and notice that there's many of them. Flagella consist of long, whip-like structures, and there's only a few of them. And so the flagella can propel a cell forward from one location to another. Now, these two structures, they're made up of microtubules. So microtubules, they're very useful in the movement of a cell. So far, we've been talking about animal cells. But now let's talk about the plant cell, because even though they are similar, the plant cell has some characteristics that are not found in the animal cell. The first of which is the presence of a very large vacuole. This vacuole stores water and nutrients, and at the same time, it provides structural support to the cell by means of the hydrostatic pressure that it generates. Now, another organelle that's found in the plant cell, but not in an animal cell, is the chloroplast. Now, the chloroplast is green due to a pigment known as chlorophyll, which plays a role in photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process by which the plant takes sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and it produces glucose and oxygen gas. Another feature that's present in plant cells but not in animal cells is the presence of a cell wall. Now, both the animal cell and the plant cell, they both contain a cell membrane. The cell membrane consists of a phospholipid bilayer, and it has a property known as selective permeability, which means that it allows some things to enter while preventing the passage of other things from coming into the cell. And it has these protein channels. Now, small molecules like oxygen gas and water, they can diffuse right into the plasma membrane. But large molecules like glucose and other stuff, they have to go through a protein channel. Even ions have to travel through channels as well. And so that's the function of the cell membrane. It's basically and click on that notification bell. Now, I do have some other
Hello! Until there muna tayo. Medyo ata natagalan tayo. Pasensya na kayo ha. Sige, kung may mga tanong, i-discuss natin yan sa for reassurance lang na allowed kayo and safe kayo na face-to-face. Thank you! Bibi, doon ka nga, Bibi. Nabalik pa yung in-call messages. Okay na, class? Meron pa ba kayong tanong?
None na po, ma'am.
Ah,
Wala
okay,
na
sige.
po, ma'am.
Ang nabanggit ko lang naman Oo, kanina sabi ko, see you sa second half ng klase tomorrow. And kung maraming requirements, okay lang class kahit hindi nyo lahat maggawa yun or ma-turn in. Basta ang importante sa akin may matutunan kayo at huwag nyong kakalimutan yung mga major exams. Okay? Stay safe and God bless.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Welcome.
Thank you po.
Bye-bye.
See you po bukas.
So,